Okay, so on this one, we're trying to solve this equation, and then they just basically tell us to solve it and separate the answers with a comma. Okay, so I'm going to bring this on. It's x cubed minus 81x equals 0. So how do we solve an x squared or x cubed with an equal sign? How do we do that? Well, step number one is you've got to get a 0. Of course, we've already got that. So I'll just say, check. So, all right, so step number 2 is to factor. Now, so I got to factor this side over here. Factor means, with parentheses and, find out what would multiply. What would multiply to be this? So what's the first step on factoring? So now this chapter's been all about factoring. Chapter 7 here, all about factoring. So now we're pros of factoring. What's the first step? First step in factoring. What's always the first thing we do? Number 1, is there anything in common, right? That's always our first step in factoring. Is there anything in common? Do these two have anything in common? And yes, they do. Take out an x. Have the 2 blanks inside with the minus in between. X times x squared, x times 81. Right? So the answer is yes. They have an x in common, right? Okay, and you put the 1 parenthesis like that. Okay, and then step 2 in factoring is what do we do with the factor that? So you leave the x in the front and factor the parentheses. Factor into 2 parentheses. Okay, so how so? How are we going to factor this into 2 parentheses? Well, remember it's multiply, because we're missing the middle term. If we had, so let me bring the x to the front. So the x just stays in the front. We're going to do the 2 parentheses equals 0. Okay, keep the equal 0 and break it into 2 parentheses. And so how do we, we're going to factor 2 parentheses, leave the x in the front. So multiply, because when you have 3 terms, it's multiply, add, multiply. But if you just have 2 terms, it's multiply. So what's it going to be? Well, x times x makes x squared, and 9 times 9 makes 81. How do you make negative 81, though? 1 positive, 1 negative. Positive 9 times negative 9 makes negative 81. Okay. So leave the x in the front, factor the 2 parentheses. So now what do we do? Step 3, each part with an x set equal to 0. Every part that has an x you set equal to 0. So I'm going to take this x alone, 0. I'm going to take this x plus 9. So I'm going to take this x minus 9. Now, what's up with that? I'll put ors in between. Why are we doing all of that stuff? Well, that's because of the fact that these are 3 things multiplying to equal 0. What if I told you, hey, I'm thinking of 3 numbers. I've got to, let me come on in here. This step 2. I kind of lost my steps here. So, over here. So step 1, step 2, step 3. So I should have, I wrote this in the wrong part. These were steps 1 and 2 for factoring. Yeah. That was all the factoring. But then the main steps, I kind of lost myself in my steps. Each part with x set equal to 0. And that's what I did. Okay. So each of those parts that had an x equals 0. Now, why? Well, because if you think about it, we have a bunch of things multiplying to equal 0. If I said, hey guys and gals, I'm thinking of 3 numbers. First number times the second number times the third number, and it equals 0. How could that be? How could I multiply, right? Parentheses mean multiply. How could I multiply three things and have an answer come out 0? Well, the first one could be 0, because 0 times anything times like 0 times 7 times 6, it's just 0, isn't it? Or the one in the middle could be 0. We could go 5 times 0 times 4, and it'd be 0, right? You could have the one in the front be 0, the one in the middle can be 0, or we could go 8 times 2 times 0, the one in the back, and that'd be 0, right? If any one of those three, the first one, the middle one, or the third one, if any one of those three is 0, they're all going to multiply to be 0. Just one of them. You just have to, when three things are multiplied, if just one of them is 0, whenever you multiply by 0, the whole thing becomes 0, huh? So what does that mean logically? The first one, so since we know they're multiplying to equal 0, that means logically the first one could be 0, or the second one could be 0, or the third one could be 0. That's the only way they're multiplying to equal 0. Makes sense? So this one's done. 0 is one of our answers. X is already alone there. But this one and this one, we're going to have to finish up. How do we finish up? Well, we just, here's the wall. Subtract 9 from both sides. Boom. So X is minus 9. So that one's done right there, and this one's done. And then this one over here, just add 9 to both sides. Boom. And so X is 9. So there's our three answers. What are they? 0, -9, and regular 9, or positive 9. Those are our three answers. So we go up here and put them in any order you want. Well, I scribbled all over the blank here. You choose this one, you go 0, 9, -9, or any order. You can put the 9 first and the -9 for whatever. The order doesn't matter. Just separate them by commas. Those are our three answers. Meaning, if you plugged any one of those three numbers in, it would make it true. You can check it if you're interested. Put in 0 first off. Look at that. Put in 0 for X. Of course, it's true. We should have guessed at that one, right? 0 cubed is 0 minus 81 times 0 is 0. Certainly equals 0. 0 minus 0 is 0. That's true. What if you put in 9? 9 to the third power minus 81 times. You can try it in your calculator. It's 729 minus 729. It does equal 0. And the same thing is true if you put in -9. So those are the three answers that you can plug in for X. And any of those three will make the equation true, will make it equal 0. So they're what we call solutions to the equation. They're the X values that work, that make the equation true. So again, what did we do? Step number 1, whenever you have X squared or X cubed, you've got with an equal sign, you've got to get a 0. We already had that. Step 2, you factor. Now remember, factoring is step 1, take out what's in common with a 1 parenthesis. Boom, boom, goes back. And then factor leave the X in the front and factor the parentheses from there. Multiply it. We got the 2 parentheses, X plus 9, X minus 9. And then step 3, set each part that has an X equal to 0. So the X alone in the front was one answer, and then the X plus 9 equals 0, and the X minus 9 equals 0. That's because they're multiplying to equal 0. If three things multiply to be 0, any one of them can be 0. And we solved for X here, -9, solved for X there, +9. Those are our three answers, 0, 9, and -9. So there we go.